It's 2004, and the floating city of Terra Grigia is enjoying an era of prosperity brought on by their use of solar energy as a major power source. Now, for some reason that's never made clear, this really pisses off the terrorist group Veltro, who unleashes a horde of bioorganic weapons on the city. After the FBC is called in to clean things up, it's decided Terra Grigia is a lost cause and must be destroyed a la Raccoon City. The city is burnt to the ground using a giant satellite that focuses light rays much like a
giant laser.
Revelations takes place between RE4 and 5, 1 year after the Terra Grigia incident and during the infancy of the Biosecurity Assessment Alliance, or the BSAA. Throughout the game, you play as Jill Valentine, who seems to have had a little bit of cosmetic work done. Jill and her partner have been called in to investigate the SS Queen Zenobia, an ocean liner believed to have been used in the terrorist attack 1 year earlier and the last known location of Chris Redfield. Upon further exploration and the intervention of Veltro, Jill is stranded and finds that Chris was never even on the ship to begin with. This is where 75% of the game takes place, but you can also take control of other characters as they either attempt to rescue Jill or unravel the conspiracy she's managed to uncover. I found this game's story very enjoyable. There are more than enough plot twists to keep you on your toes, and the parallels between Revelations and RE1 and 2 are a welcome sight for any of you old survival horror fans. But newcomers to the series need not worry, as Revelation's story is its own standalone affair and can be enjoyed without completing any of the previous games. While not without its flaws, Revelations tells an enjoyable story that managed to keep me interested the whole way through. Fans of the earlier titles in the series will undoubtedly appreciate Revelation's return to a more familiar form, while the uninitiated can use this game to test the waters before taking the plunge into the series as a whole. At first glance, Revelations looks like another cheap attempt at recreating the fame of Resident Evil 4, but as early as 20 minutes into it, I realized this game is the closest to classic survival horror the series has come since 2003. The dark, claustrophobic corridors of the Queen Zenobia make for some unsettling surroundings. This, coupled with a large emphasis on eerie lighting and great sound design, keeps this game elevated above its recent peers. The aspects of RE4 that Revelations adopted have been slightly modified to work in this type of environment. Little things like a smaller, less obtrusive heads-up display and the over-the-shoulder camera being zoomed in much closer to the player were very subtle but genius changes made to keep the player immersed in the experience and wondering what's around every corner. Despite these changes, combat remains mostly unchanged, and for the most part it works really well. Running, quick turning, shooting, they all feel satisfactory, especially when playing the PC version with a keyboard and mouse. But no matter what you use as a controller, close combat is where the experience starts to dip. When enemies get in close, your aiming can get real wonky, so you want to keep them at a distance if you want to avoid any cheap deaths. Even with the increased emphasis on combat, Revelations channels the very best aspects of its forefathers. Most of what made the series great to begin with can be found here. You'll find yourself backtracking to unlock new areas, conserving your limited ammo, solving puzzles, and feeling a genuine sense of dread from a combination of great lighting and even better environment design. Now I realize I'm throwing a lot of praise out there, but I'd be lying if I said there weren't some parts of the game that rubbed me the wrong way. First off, I wasn't a big fan of the scanner ripped straight from Metroid Prime. Scanning enemies can get you green herbs, and because of this I had to pull it out constantly. Not that it's hard to use or poorly implemented, I just feel like it broke immersion a little too much. And while we're on the subject of things I don't like, has anyone else noticed these TV-like episodes creeping their way into our games? I remember not being too fond of them in games like Alan Wake or Alone in the Dark, and they're not any better here. I understand Capcom was trying to make the game more friendly for the on-the-go 3DS gamers, but this
previously on Resident Evil Revelations
thing is doing the game no favors in my opinion. And finally, I wasn't the biggest fan of the switching scenarios. I figured this was Capcom either making sure action fans didn't realize they were playing a survival horror game, or an attempt at building suspense. Either way, it wasn't exactly a deal breaker, more like a tiny gripe. Suffice it to say, Revelations is not a perfect game, but it's a damn fun romp down memory lane with a shiny new coat of paint slapped on it to sweeten the deal. Newcomers to the series will most likely find Revelations a serviceable RE4 clone, but if you're a veteran like me, you're gonna love the back-to-basics mentality Capcom took here. I don't think anyone thought they would ever hear these words, but it took the Nintendo 3DS to bring Resident Evil back to its roots. Damn.
Each one shall find again his dismal tomb, shall reassume his flesh and his own.
As an upcom version of a 3DS game, I wasn't exactly expecting a lot from Revelations in the graphics department, but hot damn, this game actually looks really good. I mean, look at the lighting, the textures, it's all really good. I especially like the addition of some serious anti-aliasing. The jagged edges on the character models were just about my only gripe with the 3DS version. There are of course a couple of muddy textures to be found, but I honestly can't remember noticing more than 2 or 3 instances of this. I mean, we're talking about a game that used to run at 400 by 240 resolution, making the jump all the way up to 1080p almost flawlessly. As expected, it's not on par graphically with the latest Resident Evil, but it also doesn't suffer from any slowdown or screen tearing, so for those of you keeping track, that's a point for Revelations and negative 562 for Resident Evil 6. I have already mentioned this, but I think it deserves special attention. Revelations' environments look amazing, not just graphically, but aesthetically. They're dimly lit, well designed, and more than a little reminiscent of a certain mansion in Raccoon City. My one and only real gripe is the enemies. There just weren't enough variations, and the few that did exist were kind of bland, with only a few exceptions. And I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but they aren't zombies, and therefore, I don't like them as much. Aside from this, I really struggle to think of any aspect of Revelations' presentation that left me wanting. Whether or not you're impressed with the game's mobile origins, Resident Evil Revelations is a very graphically pleasing experience. So this one was kind of a surprise. I mean, who would have thought the best Resident Evil game I've played in years would be a 3DS port? And there's so much about the game that I like, so let's dig right into the positives. Survival horror fans rejoice. Backtracking, item boxes, immersion, atmosphere, they're all back. And to a gamer who's been starved for these features, this is huge. Revelations also brings back the emphasis on building tension through wonderfully immersive environments. While it may be longer than older games in the series, Revelations' story lasts just long enough and ties everything up in a neat little package. I was really impressed with how good this game looks, especially when considering its humble beginnings. Now, I'll be the first to admit that the return to the series' roots has made me more than a little biased, but there were still aspects of Revelations I didn't like that much. The scanning enemies and environments mechanics seemed a little out of place in Revelations, and managed to take me out of the experience a couple times. The trained eye will be able to point out a couple of muddy or blurry textures. I would have liked to have seen more of a diverse cast of monsters. Most of the game is spent fighting tall white creatures of varying height. Well guys, I gotta say, Resident Evil Revelations was a damn enjoyable game, and I can honestly recommend it to new and old RE fans alike. The return to survival horror elements will bring a smile to any PS1 era gamer, and the RE4 fans will feel very comfortable with the game's controls and combat. This game gets a solid recommendation from me. Well, I think I've said about all I can say, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. But make sure to leave me a comment down below letting me know what you think about Resident Evil returning to its survival horror roots. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay updated on all my other videos. Also, feel free to drop me a line on Facebook or Twitter. Well, I'll see you guys later, and as usual, I'm Jared.
This is definitely for mature viewing audiences.
And this has been Avalanche Reviews. Hey, thanks for watching guys, and if you're indeed a jaded Resident Evil fan, then make sure to check out my top 4 features that need to return to Resident Evil right here. Or maybe action adventure is a little more your pace. Well, if that's the case, check out my top 5 games to cure Zelda addiction right here. Or maybe you're just some kind of jerk who doesn't like any video games, and if that's the case, what the hell are you doing watching this video all the way through? Get out of here. Jerk.